Welcome to Criticality Redux, the Critical IT podcast. I'm Joseph Joubert, and very shortly we'll be joined by our guests. We will be talking about cutting edge tech topics from unique perspectives. This podcast made possible by Secure Nation and Cybertronic Solutions. Join us after the show as we apply critical thinking to the topics and things that we discuss today. With all that out of the way, we're going to start the show. This week, actually, really last week, the DEA and Department of Justice brought down the Prince gang. Um, Actually, the Prince group, not the Prince gang. It's a criminal syndicate. They got them for 127,271 bitcoins, and they got them on money laundering, human trafficking, all sorts of other things. So this was a very amazing feat and great thing. Usually, we don't see a lot of cyber criminals brought to justice. My big thing is I'm wondering where all that Bitcoin is going to go. Hopefully, it's used in a very good way. And I'm looking forward to seeing what our hot seat guest has to say about it later on in the show. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host, Hayward. Ashley. Ashley, our wonderful moderator, is about to bring him on.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Hey there. How's it going, man?
Doing wonderful, doing wonderful.
Yeah, so normally I don't have too much to say on this part, but I do want to give Hayward a better introduction. He does
Uh,
some really amazing things over in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And expecting when I first met him for him a lot further in his career than he actually is. I was surprised that he's still early on. Hayward, if you wouldn't mind giving yourself a little intro
yeah.
off your topic.
So my name is Hayward Duresseau. I actually work in the healthcare industry. I'm also the vice president for ISACA Baton Rouge chapter out of the greater Baton Rouge area. And I've been doing that roughly about almost 3 to 4 years now. The same amount of time as in healthcare. And here I am. I've been kind of knowing Joseph for quite some time. I would say I first met him at one of the cybersecurity meetups in Lafayette, which was DEF CON, and he was doing some presenting there. And he kind of intrigued me a little bit because of some of his thought provoking questions that he had. And so, thus, became our friendship and having these conversations. So, thank you for having me, Joseph.
Glad you can be here. So you had we were talking before the show, and normally asked my co-host to bring on a news topic, but Hayward actually had some really interesting things he wanted to talk about. So if you want to bypass the news article and just start talking about your topic, and again, our hot seat guest is going to elaborate on that later on in the show.
You're asking if there was any specifics in news topics that I had. There was just one in particular that I was kind of doing some research on, which was pretty much like the whole AWS shutdown that happened earlier. I would say this week, which was on the 20th, if I can say it, and it took out several different sites. It was like AWS, it was Perplexity, it was Roblox, and a whole bunch of the gaming applications and some airlines registration systems that were out there. And it was just letting me know that maybe there fell over issues where they were having some issues where it wasn't necessarily depended upon one specific system that should have actually just kind of been broken up to where they had more dependency on its other areas. So if there was an actual failover of some sort, that it would then automatically lean over to that and not necessarily rely on one particular system. So that would be one of the major things that happened this week that had my eye on for most of the point. Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be interested in that. I think everybody felt some kind of way with that. I know one of my friends was saying that her internet service provider had actually been affected by that. I think it was Cox.
Oh wow. Eh, could that have been what we were dealing with when you
I, I'm not sure. I know when I was first starting to get into Web 3.0 several years ago,
Mhm.
one of the things that we had discussed was how Amazon owned just entirely too much of the Web 2.0 infrastructure. But we can definitely get into more of this with Terrence, our hot seat guest, who we can start introducing now, and Ashley can bring on here in a minute. Terrence Sadler is going to be our hot seat guest, and he's going to be going through the gauntlet soon. Terrence has Terry, as he'd like to be called, has over 4 decades of experience, which that almost blows my mind until I realize how much experience I have myself. Um, Time creeps up on all of us. He's an author of a very amazing book called Cybersecurity for Everyone:
Okay.
Securing Your Home or Small Business Network. Um, Ashley, if you wouldn't mind bringing Terry on, looking forward to having this episode and another amazing set of guests.
I think I was reading some of those reviews that were about that book just right privacy, probably right before we actually got logged on, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Probably one of those books that I'll kind of add to my collection as I have many.
Okay, cool. So, welcome to the show, Terry. We're gonna jump in to the next segment before we really get to know you. We're gonna start going through the gauntlet. And talk to you a little bit about this. I had the pleasure of having lunch with you and your wife today. Ashley and I had the pleasure of lunch with you all. I was able to kind of discuss what we're gonna do with the gauntlet today, which is Hayward and I are gonna bring up. We're gonna take turns going over the different critical infrastructure sectors with you, and you're just gonna talk about from your perspective what you see we can do better or flaws with the different things. Like there's just so many different things we can talk about each sector. If there's a sector you don't really feel comfortable talking about, then you can just say pass. And all the time that we have built up to the end, we can talk about some other stuff. It's not a big deal. There's no
All right.
pressure. Ashley, if you don't mind bringing up the wheel. All right, we're about to switch gears and go into the wheel of criticality. Why do we have ads? There we go. All right, spin that wheel. I'm going to bring up the first topic. Right,
Communication
yep,
sector.
communication sector. So the time starts as soon as we start talking about it. Um, this is a very interesting sector, and I don't think a lot of people give it respect it deserves. Um, it covers everything from our basic satellite infrastructure, which isn't so basic,
Mhm.
to our wired and wireless networks and so many things. Um, did you have anything in particular you'd like to talk about?
Are we looking at the same thing? I'm seeing critical manufacturing.
No, once we bring up a topic, it gets taken off the wheel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, that's fine. So we're talking about the critical, the communication sector.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. So the last 3.5 years, I told you I was with the Signal Battalion in Okinawa. I can't get into the mission or anything like that, but that was very eye-opening to understand how much we rely on communications globally, not just within the United States, but our ability to communicate globally with our partners and with each other even.
Mhm.
And not knowing
Did you
how
guys
everything works, within the commercial sectors, it's a little bit. I'm a little weak on that area, but I could talk for a while about DoD.
did you guys get to use troposphere technologies?
Well, so fallback, one of the things that they have been trying to do, and this is interesting, is they would have HF exercises. So we would use just traditional old HF ham equipment, actually, and do some communication exercises like that. And it was kind of concerning that that was one of the areas that we were not as strong as we should have been.
That's actually interesting to start talking about disaster recovery and business continuity with communications, because businesses may not even have that in their planning procedures.
So Terrence, tell me what do you find were some of the weak points?
Well, when you're talking about HF communications in general as a backup to your satellite communications, there's not that many people that actually have systems set up and in place. So that would probably be the number one. And then having expertise to actually understand how communications works in the HF arena. You know, your Joseph, you mentioned the troposphere, right? Tropospheric scatter being one of the things. But with HF long haul communications, you really have to understand time of day and how the E layer of the ionosphere can affect your communications. So during the day, the sun, if I remember right, this is going back on a lot of my theory. The sun it dissipates the ionosphere. So the higher the frequency, the less likely your communications are going to go where you want. So you have to play with the frequency spectrum, basically.
Nice. I hear you loud and clear. I think we're moving on to the next topic.
All right.
Hayward, it's your turn, man.
Do we just start talking about it?
Yeah, Hayward, you would introduce this, and then Ashley would take it off the board.
So I guess the next topic would be around nuclear reactors. And I kind of like basically like looked at this from different perspectives, just from an IT auditor's perspective, trying to identify like the failures, the lessons, the mitigations, and then also the root problems. And it's one of the things that I necessarily found within the nuclear reactors was that targeting cyber probes exploited maintenance connectivity to sensitive control systems. Can you speak a little bit about that at all?
Well, I can't speak from firsthand knowledge, but I can speak from education and understanding risks to the critical infrastructure in general. We faced some of the exact same types of threats in the Department of Defense when it comes to ICS controls and the connections between your IT and your OT. And I don't think that we put enough emphasis in a lot of cases in trying to tighten up those older systems that are still in place that could be vulnerable with someone having insider knowledge about how they're interconnected and which ones might put you at the greatest risk.
Okay. Noted. Next topic.
Okay, let's see what we get.
So it looks like we're going to stop
Financial.
on the financial sector.
Okay, so next sector is financial services sector.
So this one's very interesting. And I think Ashlyn might remember when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. It just so happens that one of the big data centers for the government's pay system is in New Orleans. And that was quite unexpected. You know, I think most of the financial sector they go through the normal checks and balances to try to assess risk and be prepared for something. But unfortunately, an event like Katrina is not something that happens all the time. And we don't really plan well for the unexpected. We plan for what we think might happen. But when something like Katrina happens and you get the massive flooding that they had, and then it was crazy. So I had friends in the financial sector at that time, and they talked about how difficult it was after Katrina to be able to recover and get their systems back up in place. They just didn't have good backups.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh dang it, we're already out of time. I would have kept going because there's so much to talk about on that one.
Ooh, defense industrial base. That one's interesting. So, defense industrial base being all of the contractors and contracting companies that support Department of Defense. That's a mixed bag because you've got so many different companies that are involved. And while we do have some overarching regulations that companies have to be compliant with, in fact, the I think it's CMM. I want to say CMMA, but I know it's not CMMA. I'm drawing a blank
I think
right
it's
now. It's
I
what's
think
that?
it's CMMC.
CMMC. Thank you. That's the new. In fact, it comes online, I believe, on 1 November or 10 November. It's right around the corner where companies have to follow in with compliance with that. It's kind of interesting. We have something similar within the Department of Defense where we have to go through what's called a CORA, Cyber Operational Readiness Assessments, and being that CMMC compliant is going to be challenging for the companies that are involved in it. There's a couple companies that have sprung up. There's one here in Louisiana that actually helps DIB customers prepare for CMMC certification. That's Ingalls Security here, right outside of Alexandria. It's in Woodworth, is their headquarters. Jason Ingalls, if you have seen him on online.
Um, yeah, they're currently. Um, yeah, that's a good company. Highly recommended.
Looks like our next topic is information technology. Take it away, Terry.
uh, we could talk all night about information technology sector. I think one of the things that is of most concern to me, and Joseph and I kind of talked about it a little bit, and that is supply chain. All of our information technology, for the most part, is coming from all sorts of different locations. We got stuff coming out of China, stuff coming out of Taiwan, stuff coming out of Israel. Not a whole lot that's being made, domestically for our IT technology. And if you start talking about like Internet of Things
Mhm.
devices, you're really opening up a mixed bag because the majority of them don't even have normal firmware updates.
Yeah.
So whenever they discover a vulnerability in one of those Internet of Things devices, we're really, you know,
And
we're at the mercy.
several years ago, this was a high button topic where chips and things had malware in it. Like we had found mice and keyboards and things with malware embedded into it, and we used to be concerned with those types of things. But I haven't heard anybody discuss things like that for quite a while. Next topic already.
Hmm.
Government services or government facilities, I think it is. Services, it says.
Well, facilities could be an interesting thing. I do have a little bit of experience with like the physical security side of facilities. So all of your access control, not thinking IT access control, but actual access control to the facilities. And that's an interesting one. Within the government, I think we've got a pretty good. Of course, now when I say government, in my case, I'm thinking mostly DoD, and I don't have enough experience with any of the other agencies out there that also have critical facilities. I mean, we mentioned just a minute ago the financial sector. So the government has a lot of, with the Department of Treasury, those are all kinds of facilities.
Mhm.
Um, so, yeah, that's an interesting one.
If a local government, let's say a local mayor, had their email account compromised, would that have some type of play into that where all their emails and the accounts connected to those emails, and people and their identities associated with their contacts and things, um, where whoever compromised that account would have that information available.
Yeah, I think you've hit on an interesting topic, Joseph. It's kind of like the discussion we had about small businesses. Small
Yeah.
businesses don't have a lot of resources. Well, if you talk about small municipalities, right, they don't have a whole lot of resources either.
Yeah. And they're pretty convenient already. We need to push this 1 minute business out more.
Critical manufacturing.
So, critical manufacturing. I can only think on this one in terms of relational risks. So, I would think like one of the reasons that President Trump has been focused on trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States is because we don't have the ability internally anymore to develop or to manufacture a lot of the things that we need to support not only defense but our national infrastructure that supports everything like our highways, our communications infrastructure internal to the United States. There we go.
Oh, dang it! I thought it was going to be food and agriculture, healthcare. Hayward, do you want to take this one?
Healthcare and public health. So, we're talking about like maybe failures within ransomware, disrupting billing and patient access, and nationwide. Some of the lessons that I think I've kind of learned is that data availability is a patient safety issue. And what that means to me is that a lot of times, whenever you're looking at it from a mitigation standpoint, we're looking at encrypting medical data, implementing immutable backups, and also using continuous third-party security scoring. What I find happens to be some of the root problems with that is data inoperability outpaced data security, with rapid digitization left gaps with encryption, and sometimes identity governance, and then also continuity planning.
We already moved on. So we can come back to that one later, Hayward. Food and agricultural sector. This is one of my favorite topics. Um, I actually, on the side of what I do in the daytime, I actually have a small farm. And one of the things that my friends with the Cubic Forum do, and what brings us together, is discussing the technology that we see advancing in the farms, like headless automation and tractors and things like that. What are security risks that you see coming up in the future that we should start talking about?
That's an interesting one. I think we could take a look at Hollywood for that. If you remember the movie Interstellar,
Mm.
Hmm.
and of course they were farming corn and things like that. That's prominently what was up there. But if you think about the combines, those combines were operating independent. They were not. They didn't have any person on board. While I don't think there's a lot of risk with that in particular, anything like that would be interconnected with other systems. And I think that there's a risk in that regard if you're using that type of system on a farm, especially one that is a high output for a lot of people.
And we have that now. Actually, we have autonomous combines, which I'm not sure how how dang it, the wheels spinning. Oh, dang.
Looks like dam sectors.
I can introduce this one if you want. The the dam sectors. Something most people think of the Hoover Dam and things like that, and that is a high tech. I mean, it's extremely high tech. We have dams all over the United States, and I mean all over the world. But there's technology embedded in these things that most people it's out of sight, out of mind. As we continue to progress technology, on the tech spectrum, what are things we should start looking out for? Especially as we start evolving the different AI sectors, and machine learning and all that.
In terms of the dams themselves, that's an interesting one because a lot of the dams are used for power production as well. So there's an overlap with the the conservation side as well as with energy production. And all of those dams have communities downstream as well. So there's always a risk if you were able to keep a dam from closing, or if you were able to open a dam and just let it go when it shouldn't, you could wind up with flooding. And while that may not be I guess it depends on how fast the flooding happened. That's an interesting topic. I don't have enough background in it to.
From Louisiana, we can definitely see like the Morganza spillway and some of the other ones. If we would put AI more proficient in there to where it's capturing trends and things like this, it may be to where it's more adaptive and active, because we've had times where humans messed with it incorrectly and flooded when they shouldn't have, or kept things too dry when they shouldn't have. You got this one?
Emergency services sector.
Me or Hayward?
Were you able to hear me? It's a emergency sectors. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, let's layer it down to where we live. So, small community emergency services is something that I would think about. And communications, you talked about the AWS being out. One of the scenarios that I have in my upcoming book actually deals with an outage that affects a small regional hospital and their ability to respond to emergencies during this outage. Not having good backup communications was one of the concerns. And I think that that's an area that we need to continually exercise and focus on. What are we going to do in a backup? And there's so many things that's related. I mean, your emergency generation power, your fuel supply, getting the vehicles, notifying ambulances and having first responders on hand to be able to respond to accidents and all sorts of things.
That stuff, man, I forget how much they actually have data reliant. Oh goodness, the chemical sector. We have a lot of this that we see in Louisiana because we actually produce quite a bit.
Yeah. So while I don't have a lot of experience in the chemical sector, it does concern me just if you think about it from a potential vector for causing a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Everything from at the point of manufacturing, wherever I say manufacturing, however they make the chemicals, right? The plants where they're making the chemicals, but not just that. It's also when they're transporting the chemicals, whether it's by land or by train or by ship, there's potential risks at each stage in that. And all of our communications are definitely tied to that when we're moving equipment. So if there was some way that an adversary was able to take advantage of our communication system with those.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Usually, when I talk chemical, I'm focused more on the operational technology side, how they're making it, all the different valves and systems and stuff. But I don't really focus on the transportation side. That's vital things that we need to be looking at. Oh, cool. We're going into transportation. I guess we can just keep talking about it.
Yeah, transportation sector. I think if you look back to when COVID happened, right? We shut down most of our airports. I don't know if you remember, we didn't have airplanes hardly flying at all. There were, if you looked up in the sky, there were no contrails.
I don't remember this whole pandemic thing. I worked through the whole thing. I
Right. Well,
don't
I'm
remember.
not saying that this particular thing, but we have the accident that happened over the Hudson River with the Army helicopter and the right the passenger jet that was coming. They had either just taken off or were landing. I don't remember exactly, but there was a lack of communications in that case. That was an accident, right? What if it were intentional? Different situation altogether. And I think our transportation is critical. I mean, our trains, our fleet of the trucks that the 18 wheelers that move across the America's highways,
Hmm.
everything like that is a potential um, risk
Yes.
to a lot of things, right? Fuel supply. If the fuel supply is not there, then they can't move. If they can't move, we don't get food. If we don't get food, things could go south real fast.
Well, let's right on the line. What is
Right
it?
on the.
Energy sector. I can take this one, Andrew. So energy sector is another one of my favorite talking points. I worked over a decade in the oil and gas industry, and we're all from Louisiana, um, which you can't be from Louisiana and not be impacted by the oil and gas industry in some type of way. We all have relatives that work there. We all share the roads with companies who transport oil and gas over it some type of way. What are I could go on with the vulnerabilities we have in that industry, but what are things that you see that we do need to watch out for? Because Louisiana is one of the leading um, states in the energy sector, and other states may not. People may not even realize Louisiana is high up there. But,
Yeah, if I were to point to any one in particular, it'd be LNG.
mhm.
We've got huge hubs down south that move most of I probably one of the largest hubs for getting LNG out to the rest of the United States, and then also getting it overseas. So I think that's an area of constant risk. I would not want to be the guy responsible for securing the LNG, not just the pipeline, but everything that's involved in moving that gas from one location to another.
you know, we do have a couple groups that are in charge of that, and they do work really good with government sectors, thankfully. But even then, we could always use more people in there. Hayward, you got this one.
The commercial facilities sector. Hmm.
So for me, I would be thinking stadiums,
Mhm.
like the Superdome, um, keeping those accessible and safe. That's probably, again, that's another one of those areas. I mean, you could take out. I don't know how many people can fit in the Superdome at one time, but I would imagine it's upwards of what 20,000. If you've got all the bleachers filled, maybe more. I'm not really sure. It's been years since I've been to the Superdome, but man, the facilities like that, and it's not just those big malls
Mhm.
across America still have. We still have a lot of facilities that are open. Amusement parks, those are all areas that I would be concerned, just from a risk standpoint. And I'm not talking just necessarily cybersecurity, but it's all aspects of security related to those. So our communications, the access to the facilities themselves, physical security, law enforcement, having first responders available, especially if it were a large scale, man.
You said a lot right there. They do attract a lot of attention. There's people with cell phones and things like that, credit cards. There's people that have scanners and scammers, and there's just so many targets. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna do the last one. Waste and wastewater sector. Uh, this is something that a lot of people have conspiracy theories about, and it's we all have to deal with it, and we don't really think about it very often. But it's something you had talked about earlier, where smaller municipalities may not have good funding, but they have water and wastewater that they have to deal with. Most of them run those organizations and facilities.
Right.
What are some types of things that we should be looking at or talking about that we need to start securing as we move into future technologies and things?
Yeah, I would think that most organizations are looking at these, but just like we talked earlier about ICS, industrial control systems, those come into play with wastewater as well as freshwater, your freshwater supply, but wastewater in particular. There was an incident a couple of years ago in Australia where a control system for their wastewater was hacked, and it resulted in um, all of this wastewater getting in, not getting into the freshwater supply, but getting out of its normal um, circulation, and it could cause a lot of problems.
Even just a little backflow messes up the gray water filters and things. It causes a nightmare.
Yeah.
I think
Taxpayer.
I think at one point there was something that I recall hearing about that happened recently where there was waterways that were attacked, and they were trying to figure out exactly how did the attackers get in, and what they found was that there was a vulnerability by a manufacturer that was from overseas that manufactured these PLC units that they would put into these waterway systems, and it happened to go rogue, and then that's what had ended up causing the whole issue. To make a long story short, they were able to mitigate it, but it kind of took the system out for quite some time, to where they ended up having to figure out how what caused the issue and the root cause. I think it took roughly about 2 to 3 weeks, almost to almost a month,
Yeah.
before they could ever figure out what exactly was the cause of it, and the root cause happened to be that PLC unit.
Mm.
That's pretty deep because we have PLCs by the hundreds and thousands in so many systems and so many buildings that we pass by every day. Um, And for people out there listening, if there's anybody actually listening to this, a PLC is a simple computer that runs a fairly basic program that kind of loops. It's called a ladder logic. Um, I guess they have other programming programs that PLCs use too, but you can look it up. It's actually pretty interesting if you're looking to get into tech and into the ICS or the OT side of technology. PLCs are pretty interesting to get into.
Yeah, I was really interested in the ICS stuff when I was going through my master's program. It sounded like an area that had a lot of opportunity for growth if you wanted to get out there and do it. And I think just based on conversations I've had, I told you I was starting to work with Clico come Monday, leading up to this because I was starting to learn about the power generation side of the sector. uh, the ICS and PLCs and how they use them in their OT was interesting. So there's a lot of, I mean, some of these devices you access them via over HF.
Hmm.
So that you know
Wow. There's the yeah, that should be a, and hopefully we do get to talk more after this goes on. Hopefully there's some curious minds that want to get into this. I know there's a lot of people trying to get into cyber, and there's a lot of job openings on the IT side that may or may not be true. That's a whole different discussion. But there's definitely cyber related roles on the operational technology side, on the ICS side, that even if they're not available now on job boards, these are systems that are always coming online. There's always growth there.
Yeah.
And you may have to talk to the companies because the jobs may not be listed on job boards, but these companies are always looking for good talent.
Yeah.
I think that was, I didn't even see the wheel go away. We made it through the gauntlet. That thing goes by so fast. Um, how was that for you guys?
It was fast paced. I can tell you that much. And but it was kind of eye opening because I was able to learn a little bit from the perspective of Terrence, which I appreciate you for because there was a lot of those things that I just really never really thought about when looking at all of these different sectors. And myself personally, I'm on the cusp of actually graduating with my bachelor's in cybersecurity actually next month.
Good for you,
So
man.
repeat that again, sir.
I said, good for you, man.
Thank
That's
you, thank
awesome.
you.
That's a good accomplishment.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it was one of those things I was just looking to get into. And once I got into this challenging field of cybersecurity, I was like, wow, I don't really think I know much. But here we go. So I ended up jumping in there and hitting the ground running. And luckily, I had a boss, or should I say, leader, took me under his wing, and they kind of mentored me in the right direction. And I'm starting to see some of the results of my efforts. So just hearing your perspective, like I said, I really do appreciate it. And I hopefully we connect through LinkedIn and we can stay in connection so that I can hear more about all of these different sectors that I'm just completely not too familiar with. So I appreciate you for that. Thank you.
I actually was kind of curious. You said you were in the medical, the healthcare side of the house, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine. He's the CIO for, not CIO, CEO. I'm sorry, CEO for a group of hospitals locally. And
Mhm.
I was shocked when he told me that they had, I think they have like two IT specialists, and they don't have anybody that's a security specialist. And I was just like mind blown. I was like, you've got all of these healthcare records,
Is
and
this
they have
something?
more than one facility. I mean, they got like five hospitals that they're responsible for, and they don't have anybody doing cyber specifically. They rely on their vendors.
Hmm.
I was like,
And
again, mind blown.
a lot of times that's typically what they do to rely on their vendors. But I've noticed that, and this isn't just this is I'm not speaking about the organization that I work for, but
Right, right,
from what I've heard in the past about other organizations that are in the healthcare industry, is that a lot of times that healthcare, when it comes to cybersecurity is not put at the forefront of everything. They typically have to wait for an incident to actually happen before they
right.
start to take it serious. And I'm like, how is it that we have to wait for that to actually happen before we actually determine that we need to start looking at these things a little bit more proactively?
Yeah,
And what we've come up with is that, cybersecurity definitely needs to be at the forefront of the table. Anytime we're introducing a new application, that we need to start having information security at the forefront of those conversations as well, so that we're making sure from the beginning of deployment all the way up to continuous improvement, that we're making sure that all of those things are actually being met, and that we're looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective.
yeah.
We also have to factor in cyber insurance,
What's that?
and we have to factor in cyber insurance
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and financial accountabilities and things. It's a lot cheaper. I hate saying that, but it's cheaper to hire an MSSP than a couple of security folks
And it's
with large salaries.
And then there's also that part where, and I'm starting to learn that now, is that a lot of times it depends on who needs to own the risk. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And a lot of times organizations don't necessarily want to own much of that risk. So the main goal now is to push it towards the vendors and have them own that risk, and we focus on what we do and their processes and making sure they're compliant within those ramifications. But that does leave open the door for additional risks as well, because you never know what's going to happen if they're following the proper protocols if they're still doing it. So what do we do in those instances from like an IT auditor standpoint? Are we doing the vendor evaluations? Are we doing the questionnaires that are necessary to make sure that uh, they're upholding to their end of the bargain
Right.
and the BAA agreement?
Yeah. Well, without naming any specific organization, I had an experience not long ago, and I was talking with it was basically an MSP.
Hmm.
So not specifically an MSSP, but an MSP, and they were actually. And this gets back to the small business issue, because most of these small businesses rely on an MSP to provide their support, their IT support. They don't have enough money to pay for someone internal. Well, at the end of the day, when the normal staff for that MSP goes home, who do they have manning the phones?
Hmm.
They were not U.S. citizens. These were folks from India. And while, hey, look, they may be some really sharp people and smart, I was like shocked, because all of these, the one MSP is providing coverage for umpteen dozen companies
Hmm.
after hours. How many of these companies might have an inroad to any of the critical infrastructure that we just talked about?
Hmm.
And they get some access to provide that support. It's weird. At least in my way of thinking, that's weird. I know it may cost money. I mean, save money by hiring those guys from out of, remotely to
Yeah.
do work and everything like that. But
Yeah.
golly.
And at the end of the day, we have to trust the contract.
If I had to
That
say anything in reference to that, you also, from what I've heard, is that there's really like a knowledge gap between, those that are in the field in, let's say, the area of Louisiana versus some of those other where you can get cheaper labor, but with a higher technical background. So they're trying to bridge that gap with you know people from overseas. That's what I've been noticing in the field, but that doesn't mean that's just an end all. That's just another area of opportunity for us as cybersecurity professionals, as analysts, and so on and so forth. Is that we just need to push ourselves to pick up and bring ourselves up to the speeds of those that are, maybe overseas, that may be more a little bit more technical savvy than we thought that we were. And I think that Joseph and I were having the same conversation a little bit prior to the show. Is that you know we just have to be able to allow ourselves to be vulnerable to where we can actually see true growth and learn from each other.
Hmm.
And that comes with not gatekeeping information from other people that just feel like, we can't hold on to our positions because, this newcomer's just coming in and he's just so ambitious that he's just going to overpower. I'm not looking to take your job. Let's just put it that way. You know what I mean? I'm here to learn from you just as much as you're here to learn from me because I'm picking up insight from the outside that's pretty much more relevant than what you currently have, but you have much more experience in the workforce of actually knowing how to do these things. And I'm just taking your knowledge and applying my knowledge and hopefully bridging that gap to where, we have that happy union between us, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
and I'm sure we can keep, and hopefully we do keep talking about this. Uh, Anybody who wants to keep the conversations going, join the Qubit forum. You can go to the qubitforum.com, and we've got several rooms and stuff that you can go to. We do need to switch over to asking Terry about the initial topics we had brought up. Uh, Bitcoin, the Prince Group, and the DEA takedown.
Yeah,
Um,
I have to apologize, Joseph. I could not hear. I was listening to you guys initially with headphones on, and I had to take the headphones off and unplug and disconnect. So I missed your conversation. I heard you start, and you said something about DEA, and that's about all I heard.
okay, October 14th, the DEA had taken down a group that was using Bitcoin to pay for human trafficking and all sorts of other things. They took them down and started the prosecution process. and acquired their currency, over 120,000 Bitcoin, which is,
Wow.
you to go pull it up. I think it was a couple billion
Yeah,
dollars.
that's a lot of money.
That's crazy.
Yeah, quite a bit. It's one of the largest takedowns so far involving Bitcoin. But it's, they stopped this large human trafficking situation, and it shows that. So something I had talked to you and a couple other people about, I felt that cybercrime just wasn't being punished or followed up enough. And as we continue to just just hyper ramp up in technology, where even somebody with no skill in technology at all has a toolbox.
Yeah.
They can just type in, how do I, make a phishing email to trick somebody into giving me Amazon gift cards, and boom, a whole palette of AI generated emails is at their disposal, and they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
But now they're sending out, tons of emails to trick people. We're going to see criminals just go unprosecuted. We won't be able to do all this. So to me, this is a win. This is, showing criminals we do still care, at least a little bit.
Yeah. That one's interesting because over the years, as um, the longer you're in cybersecurity, you read more about, instances like this. And I think that you're going to see criminals do get caught and they do get put in jail for it. The problem that we have with a lot of these cases is that the criminals themselves are not even physically present in the United States. And so then you've got cross national, you've got border jurisdiction issues. Do we have the ability or the relationship with the country wherever these criminals are sitting to be able to take them out? So
Yeah.
that's a challenge. But we do occasionally see where there's rings of individuals actually connected here in the U.S. and they get hauled in. But you're right; it is that's challenging because I think there's probably more criminals outside the U.S. than there are inside the U.S. on the cybercrime side of the house. Not that it doesn't exist in the United States, because I would think we would be gullible to assume that we don't have regular, thieves in the United States, just like we do there. There's so many people that take advantage of like older people.
Yeah, but we have more individualized crime here, where it's actually syndicates and things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Hayward, you want to remind them what you were talking about?
That was a question for me. I don't have anything else. I like, again, I appreciate Tara.
At the beginning of the show, you were talking about the AWS incident, the DNS issue, which
I didn't make out what you were saying there. Can you repeat that again?
towards the beginning of the show, you were talking about AWS's issue this week that affected pretty much everyone that I know of.
You talking about I still didn't make out what you're saying. There's some
Yeah.
feedback,
I
background
think what
feedback.
you're talking about, Joseph. I heard part of the conversation. It was earlier when you were talking about the one news issue. You said you didn't have a news issue specifically, but you talked about AWS and the outage and how it affected some folks. I know for me, I actually didn't even know about it until after it had happened. I was sitting here working on my book and everything was on my computer, so I didn't even notice that it had happened. I heard about it after the fact. So I think this is, we're going to see outages like that happen. It's nothing new. It's like a power outage. I think, the best, if there's a key takeaway for organizations and individuals, is always have a fallback. What's your fallback when you lose communications? What's your analog, right?
Mhm.
Forget about the digital. What are you going to do when you don't have that ability to reach out and communicate with your cell phone, with your computer, email, text? What's your fallback? And I don't think we exercise that enough anymore because we've got constant own.
Mhm.
It's rare that we actually see an outage that affects enough people.
They don't advertise 100% uptime. I mean, it's
Right.
99.99999. So I mean, we expect outage at one point, but I think what hit a lot of people so hard was how much Amazon owns, how many people use AWS.
Oh yeah.
And I think
Um,
it's clear.
military, military uses it for a lot of things now. Because it's cheaper for us to outsource to AWS and Google than it is to try to maintain that internal control, right? I mean, it's everything's driven by the greenback.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So the time unfortunately just went way too fast. We have to say goodbye. Do you, Terry, have any charities? Or I know you have an upcoming book. You have a previous book. Is there anything that you want to publish, tell the world about?
Yeah, well, if there's any one charity, I have one charity in specific that I'd like to at least share with. And I would say, hey, if you're interested, go check them out. That's Compassion International. Compassion International is it's Christian based, but they make sure that you can get money directly to children that are in need and sponsor those children. My wife and I sponsor about 7 kids right now, and it's not that expensive. I think it's 30. No, actually, it was 32 when we started. I think it's about $42 a month is what we give to help these kids. I've got some kids in Mexico, some kids in Nigeria, all over the place. They're they're very good organization and they're well founded. You can check out their financials. They'll provide you all kinds of information, and there are definitely kids that can use some help.
Okay. I'm going to share the link when we make the video available. I've got it pulled up. Nice website.
Yeah.
I will have that available. I will also put your book, a link to your book. Is there anything else you wanted while you had a minute?
No, I think that's it. I enjoyed this. This was a lot more fun than I had anticipated.
Mhm.
I know that I'm not as well versed as I should be on some of those sectors. I do think it's interesting though because they do overlap, which is the beauty of. I think that's the beauty of security, right? I am not just a cybersecurity guy. My background is in physical security, cybersecurity, information security, personnel security, operations security. So
The
all of those
wheel is
overlap. What's
Mhm.
that?
the wheel is very demanding. It only gives us a minute. We
Yeah,
didn't go into kinetic and digital attacks. We didn't go into the multi-phased attacks on any of the sectors. We didn't go into overlapping attacks. We didn't go into government agencies and how they deal with attacks. We didn't go into who do we report to when we deal with attacks or anything.
yeah,
There's just so much we could have. And I like to leave the instructions kind of vague. When I first came up with going over with this gauntlet section, it was for me to challenge myself because critical infrastructure is something that I didn't know anything about almost a decade ago. I was
right.
just cybersecurity enterprise, and I was introduced to the maritime sector, and I was like, "Holy cow! There's this whole world of challenging, amazing stuff that is just wide open." And I felt that everybody needs to know this kind of stuff because if I was blind and I was as deep into cyber as I was back then how blind is everybody else?
Yeah,
So as the years went on, I kept trying different ways to open everybody's eyes. And
Mhm.
here we are to this. And I think this is how we do it. We bring different people with different perspectives
yeah,
and we let them introduce their best and worst perspectives and how much they know or how little they know. And
yeah.
we're all exposed in different. Nobody's going to be an expert at anything or everything. We in kindergarten, little kids they have because they have just
Yeah.
like we do, and being able to share and open up dialogue is what makes this so important.
Yeah. I will say, the the career field for cybersecurity is growing. It's not it while we can joke about the availability of the jobs that are out there, and I think there are jobs out there. There's quite a few of them out there, but finding them, finding the right person, networking, and then getting into a job that pays what you deserve is probably the biggest challenge. And then there's a lot of people that don't understand it, but just to give you some perspective, when I started my master's degree, I want to say it was around 2007. Took me a couple years because I was working full time. I graduated in 2014. I had a couple breaks in there, but when I started, I chose Regis University out of Colorado. The reason I chose them is because at the time they were one of 19 universities that had met the criteria for NSA's designation to be a cybersecurity center of excellence.
Oh, wow.
Now, if you go to NSA's website, that was 19. There were only 19 universities. Today, there's over 450.
Wow.
So that alone should tell you that the growth in the industry is exponential, and it's only going in an upward trajectory. And as long as we continue using technology, AI technology, and as it comes on, man, there's so many opportunities for good with AI, but at the same time, there is opportunities for bad with AI. And
That is true.
that's a risk. So I think that it's going to continue to grow, and you've got an opportunity to really specialize and embrace as much of the technology as you can today, especially when it comes to AI. I kind of I hate to see anybody say, "Oh man, that AI, that's we can't do anything with it." Well, if you don't get on the bandwagon now and at least understand it, you don't have to like it, but understand it, you're going to be left behind.
Far behind quickly.
Yeah.
Terry, I hate to tell you goodbye, but it's
Hey, it was a lot of fun. Thanks, Joseph. I appreciate the invite. And the only other thing I would offer is that my website is cybersecurityforeveryone.com.
okay. I'll make sure that we share that.
Although right now it just says it's under construction.
Even the dogs are saying it's time to cut this off.
Yeah. Hey, thanks again, Joseph. And it was fun having lunch with you guys today.
Absolutely. It was nice to meet you, Mr. Terrence. Thank you.
Take care, Hayward. We'll connect on LinkedIn for sure.
Absolutely. Have a good
All
day.
right. Y'all have a good
evening.
night.
You can, Hayward, if you want to hang out for a second, is there anybody that you wanted to shout, any charities or anything you wanted to talk about?
Um,
Because it was awesome having you on as a co-host, and you've got a minute or so if you want to.
Oh, no, I think this was a wonderful platform just to be able to have communication with you guys and to be able to see things from a different perspective that I just probably wasn't even thinking about from my own silo in healthcare. You know what I mean? Um, I did want to highlight whenever you mentioned something about the charities. I did want to mention that I also recommend that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is one that have to be a topic that I kind of went to a walk recently with some people that had lost friends and family members to, and it was an eye opener for me personally from having to see some people that I knew that were going through the same instances. So I also recommend maybe looking up the AFSP of Louisiana, and you can find their website at afsp.org / chapter / Louisiana.
I have that. Oh, it says the site can't be reached. Can you send me the link?
Yeah, I can send you one real
Awesome.
quick.
I'll make sure I share that as well.
It's-
It was a pleasure having you on. I look forward to having you as hopefully a host. Love to have
There
you
you go.
host for one day.
There you go. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to close out the show. Take it easy.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.